Okay, we've collected our bud wood from the vineyard when we were pruning. We've collected dormant wood because the easiest way to propagate most grapevines is through hardwood dormant cuttings. Now, I collected my cuttings. We're going to go over, just as a quick refresher, the type of wood to collect. But as soon as I collect that, I bundle it up, I label it, and I label it with good quality labels. And the best pen or marking tool to use is going to be a wax pencil in most cases. You can use Sharpies, but a lot of times under moist environments that Sharpie tends to rub off, especially if the label's slick. Okay, so a wax pencil or using a metal tag are the best options. The last thing you want to do is have a box, callus box full of cuttings and you don't know what's what, and you either have to throw it away or grow it out and try to identify later, which is a pain. So a quick 2 seconds to actually label it is going to be really important. I also like to put the date on there that I took the cuttings so I can track the progress. So as soon as we take those cuttings out in the field, we do not want them to dry out, and so we place them in a garbage bag or some sort of bag, like plastic material that doesn't breathe well, and I place some moisture in it. You don't want to have these floating in water, but you know, using a moist paper towel or newspapers to keep this bundle you know, humid and moist is going to be important. And so I've got this. If you have to wait a couple days, you can put this in a refrigerator or under cool temperatures that's not freezing to make sure these cuttings don't wake up before they're supposed to. And so we've collected the material, so I'm going to take this out and just show you, as a refresher, the material we look for when we're propagating grapevines. I have a bundle here of Miss Blanc, okay, which is a type of backyard grape variety. I've bundled it up, and usually we'll bundle a maximum of about 25 sticks per bundle, but you could have less, of course. And so the wood we're looking for, here's a cutting right here, actually the one with the label. Okay, let's see if I can get that in to show you. It's simply just a 10 to 12 inch stick of 1-year-old wood, so a cane. So the wood that was green last year, this is going to be fruitful wood. And it's going to be the healthiest wood and the easiest wood to propagate to form adventitious roots at the end. And so we make a cut right below one of the nodes. Okay, we ensure we have at least 2 nodes on this stick. All right, we make sure it's green when we make our cuts, top and bottom. And then I like to make an angled cut at the top, so I know this is the way to plant it straight down when I do put it in the ground. Makes things easier. You can also tell because at every bud, every node, there's a bud and there's a leaf scar where the leaf used to be. And so the leaf scar is always, when it's oriented upwards properly, the leaf scar, you can see, is below the bud. Okay? And so that's how you would know if you didn't make those angled cuts. It also makes it easy because you want all your cuttings to face the same direction, and so you'll see the roots will start to form here. Okay? And so we're looking at wood that's about 10 to 12 inches long. That is a nice tan color as opposed to gray, maybe maroon color depending on the variety. There's no damage or splits or cracks, no disease if we can help it. There are more instructions on that in our fact sheet, Propagating Grapevines. Okay, so I have my cuttings here, they're ready to go. And of course there are many different ways in order to get these to callus up and root, to form adventitious roots, or roots where they're not traditionally found. And so there are many ways. Some people hill these up outside in a big sand pile. Some people just stick these right in the ground. That may not be as big of an issue if you're not in a cold-prone area. But the best, easiest, really one of the most affordable ways that's going to give you the greatest success, something that's easy to do, easy to check in on, is simply this, what we call a callus box. And you can root hardwood cuttings in this box of many different types of species. Okay, and so what you're going to need simply is a opaque or non-translucent tote. We don't want sunlight getting in here. So for example, this tote I got at a general store, and it can be the size, whatever size you want. And so obviously the smaller it is, the fewer cuttings you can hold. Now remember, labeling is important, so not only did I label my bundle, I also put a list of what is in this box for quick reference. If you have a couple boxes, it gets annoying trying to figure that out. Okay, so I'm going to set my cuttings back in my bag real quick so they stay moist. Again, not wet, but just moist. Okay, and I'm going to show you what this setup looks like. You can get this for around $50. It's very economical. So the first part is our tote or bin. Okay, you can keep this in an area in sunlight, but just make sure that it's not, the opening does not receive sunlight, or the cuttings inside do not receive sunlight. And so some people will put this in a warm spot in the house, maybe in the garage, as long as it doesn't get freezing. And of course, the warmer it is, up to about 80 degrees is the sweet spot to callus and then root these cuttings. About 80 degrees. If it gets warmer than that, especially maybe you do have it in a spot that gets too much sun, it gets really hot, that can cause problems. But warm, moist conditions keep those cuttings healthy from drying out, and also that warmth helps speed up the rooting process. So what we do to help that, to provide warmth in the form of bottom heat, is simple. You've seen this before, most likely, and it's a heat mat for starting seeds. And you can get this online or at your local nursery, but you want to get the temperature controller so you can set that. Sometimes you have to set it a little higher to get the heat to around 80 degrees, but that's what we're looking for. So you can monitor the temperature. There's a little probe, but just a simple heat mat that is large enough to cover the majority of the bin. Now again, if you don't want to use this, you can still use this callus box without bottom heat, but it's going to take things longer, and you might not see as good uniformity with root formation. Okay, very inexpensive. Again, make sure you get the heat mat with the temperature controller. So I placed that underneath. I've got my temperature set at 80 degrees. Okay, now let's show you what it looks like on the inside. Okay, so take our top off. I've got my temperature probe from the thermometer set in the middle, in center mass, about 6 inches deep. Okay, and what you're going to use, there are multiple things you can use, but I found, and not just me, but others have found, the best material to keep these cuttings moist while providing good airflow is going to be shavings, wood shavings. Particularly if you can find cedar shavings as opposed to pine shavings, that cedar oil is going to help suppress the mold that would naturally want to grow in here and extend the use of this media. So it's like a couple bucks more, but it tends to perform a little bit better. But you could also use other material, maybe a finer material, but these coarse cedar or pine shavings, again, preference to cedar is ideal. You're going to take that cedar, it's hydrophobic, it doesn't want to moisten. You can moisten it up with regular water, and then what you're going to do when you place your cuttings initially is you take that cedar, make sure it's well mixed and moist, and you're going to get a handful and squeeze it. And if you see water dripping down your arm, then it's too wet. Okay, we want moisture. We don't want to see actual water droplets. You know, maybe one little droplet's okay, but it should feel moist. Okay, feel wet, but not actually drip. If it does, you're going to have to drain that off. Okay. And so what we do is we put a layer of that moist shavings at the bottom, and we take our cuttings. Okay, here's another one. These are my Vitex, okay, my chase tree cuttings. And we're going to lay these down. Now some people like to lay them vertically in, okay, and some people like to do it horizontally. I like horizontal. I think it's a little easier to move things around, but that's your choice. And so you're just going to simply put these down. You want to make sure that those cedar shavings are covering every part of the bundle of cuttings, okay, and you're just going to add more shavings and then put more cuttings and add, kind of like a sandwich. And then you're going to make sure that the top, which is most prone to drying, is going to be well covered, maybe a couple, 2, 3, maybe 4 inches of shavings. Now the critical thing is to make sure to check these shavings once a week, maybe a little bit more frequently, and ensure by doing the same test we did with the shavings when we initially mix up our moist shaving mix, is to make sure it remains moist, not dry, not saturated. Okay, and so we're going to have to check that. That's pretty much the only maintenance we're going to have to worry about, and then making sure our temperature is staying around 80 degrees. Okay, again, don't put this in an area that's going to freeze. this heater only provides a small amount of heat, and so if you get drastic temperatures, it's not going to be able to do its job. Okay, so inside preferably is best. Now I want to show you, you place your cuttings. With grapes, we don't need to use rooting hormone. If you have other hardwood cuttings, they may call for auxin type hormones to help increase the speed and success of the formation of adventitious roots. You could apply that dip or powder and put that on your cuttings appropriately and then place them in the callus box. Okay? And so what we can do is we'll be checking this, and what we're going to be looking for is every few weeks, maybe every couple weeks, we're going to be looking, and here's a great example. Grapes are really easy to propagate this way. Let's see if I can get, here's a bundle of Lamonto, which is one of my favorite grapes. We've talked about it before. Okay, and let me see if I can get this. Here's our cuttings. These have been in here for about 2 weeks, and you can see, here's one at the base, this kind of goopy looking white tissue. That is the parenchyma tissue, or the what we call nobody cells. They're essentially stem cells, and so where the cambium is, this tissue is forming, this callus tissue. It's undifferentiated cells. They don't know what they're going to be just yet, but as you can see, they are becoming adventitious roots. And so here we can see the roots are very healthy. They're nice and white with yellowish green tips. If the roots start turning brown, they are rotting, and we want to make sure we avoid that. And so we're going to wait a little bit longer because only a few of these cuttings, a couple of them are early birds, but once the roots get to a couple inches long, we can start potting these up, especially here in areas that receive spring frost. We don't want to plant these out. We want to bump that. We want to put them in 1-gallon pots with a well-draining potting mix, and then we're going to put them out in the ground after our spring frost risk is done. It's over. Okay, so usually for most of us that's mid-March. Okay, and so we've got this. Some of them you're always going to have a few that don't take for whatever reason, but we've got a bundle here that the vines are callusing beautifully. These cuttings. Okay, and they're also starting to form their roots. Now, one thing you may notice on the other side, which we don't hear, which is good, is you might start seeing buds waking up at the top. And of course, with no sunlight, they're going to start ideolating or stretching, reaching for the sun, be very spindly and white. Okay, and we don't want to see those because those are our primary shoots. Okay. Of course, we don't want fruit the first year anyways when establishing grapes, because we want to focus on root establishment primarily. But if we start seeing ideolated shoots coming from the tops, okay, if you see some from the bottom, it's not a big deal. We don't need them there. They're just going to die. But at the tops, where you're going to start taking that shoot eventually when it's planted and train a nice trunk from it, if we see ideolation there, we can still attempt to plant this out, but we've lost our primary strongest shoot, and we may not see other shoots come out. Most likely we will, but there are cases when the secondary or tertiary never come out. And so timing is important. We want to take these when they're fully dormant. Okay. And we don't want them sitting in the callus box for longer than they have to. Once we start seeing roots forming, maybe about 1 inch long to 2 inches long maximum, we can actually go ahead and pot these up like I mentioned. So when you're looking at this material in your callus box, you have to be extremely gentle because these roots are very fragile. And so when I look to see if there's rooting, I don't do it all the time, every week to 2 weeks, like I said. And this process takes anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks, okay, depending on the material. But I'm going to place it gently back, not to disturb this bundle as little as possible, and also not to disturb its neighbors. Okay, and so those bundles can be pretty close together within the callus box. I like to give a little room, but just keep that in mind. So again, let's see if maybe you can see that. Okay, it's just a simple system that provides excellent results, very inexpensive. I'm going to place some more shavings on the top. Again, have a couple inch layer. Make sure they stay moist. And if you notice that the container is staying too moist or too saturated, you can even poke a few holes in your container. Okay? That's it, guys. So we're going to take these cuttings maybe another week to 2 weeks. We're going to pot them up. We're going to keep them out of the cold. We can acclimate them to the sunshine very slowly. And then once our spring risk, our average last spring frost date passes, we can plant these in the ground and we've got a brand new grapevine or grapevines. Okay, remember, Mustang grape, Vitis mustangensis, and Vitis rotundifolia, the muscadine, two separate species, but those tend to be a little harder to propagate from hardwood cuttings. We can take green cuttings and actually propagate those out under a mist system in a greenhouse. Okay, but this is how you would callus and root, okay, your material, your hardwood cuttings that are dormant for many species, including grapes. One other thing I forgot to mention, some people will also, if they're growing rootstock, there's two options. You can callus the rootstock first and then bud or graft onto that when it's potted up or in the ground. That's known as top working. Or you can actually, if you have access to both rootstock budwood or a cutting, and then also your scion or a variety you're interested in, you have dormant wood of that budwood, you can take that, graft the two together or bud, and then you can callus both the root, okay, both the base of the cane or cutting to get callus and then roots, and also the top part, the graft union that you've just made, will callus as well, but that's not going to become roots. That will become most of it will not become roots. You might see one coming out and it won't make it, but most of that material is actually going to become the vascular tissue. Okay, so you could do that as well. So some people, if you want to graft grapes or other hardwood cuttings, you can graft both the dormant wood together, your rootstock and scion, and then callus both tissues at once in this callus box as well. Okay, a couple options there, but this is how we would also do that. So I hope that is clear. If you have any questions, consult our vine propagation fact sheet on aggiehorticulture.tamu.edu or give us a call. Thanks.